Hey, how's life?
Man, if things were any better, I wouldn't know what to do with myself, man. I wouldn't know what
Really?
to do with myself. Things are going good. Things are going really well. How about yourself on your end of the world?
On the other end of the world, yeah, exactly. I'm over here in Berlin, and weather has been suboptimal the past couple of weeks. It's been a strange situation over here. So usually, it's been like in London over here, strangely enough. So like rain all the time, like nonstop, and over the past like 2 months maybe. So really almost every single day, gray weather, cold-ish, but definitely not comfortable because like windy and rainy. So that's kind of situation over here. But other than that, there's a lot to be grateful about. That's for sure. Yeah.
That's the truth, man. You could have been explaining how it is over here too, almost word for word. I
Right.
understand completely. Yep.
Where are you over there?
I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, so on the closer to the east coast of the United
Yeah.
States.
Um, did you grow up there or did you move there?
I moved here 3 years ago. So I actually was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State. So I'm used
Oh
to
wow.
gray overcast, the rain, the gloomy weather and things like that. So that's just another day for me. I'm so accustomed to that to where it's just another day. Yep.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, I glad that we made it finally
Definitely.
on the
Definitely,
on the
man, for sure.
podcast. Yeah, and I'm really stoked to be talking to you because I saw some of your content and some of the stuff you post on Instagram primarily and and your Insta stories. It's been quite inspiring.
I
So
appreciate that, man. Yeah, thank you. I really do appreciate that.
right, did you get similar comments from other people?
I have every now and then. I've been making content and putting out just sort of a reflection of my life for a couple of years now, and I just recently branded to a new page. But yeah, every now and then I get people like you reaching out who it's just incredibly, it reminds me of the reasons why I do what I do. So I really do appreciate hearing those kind of messages back.
Right, right. Have you ever experienced like podcast invitations? Has that been a thing?
I have done a couple of them. So we've done a couple out here locally where I've talked on different topics and so
And this
forth.
is
I think
nice.
I've done maybe 3 or 4 of them overall. Not too many of them, but I have my experience with them a little bit.
Right. No, it's really nice hearing different experiences from people and getting to know people from like all over the world. It's such a privilege if you think about it, right? So
It really
back
is.
back then, like you'd only have the chance to locally, which is like great enough, to have the opportunity to talk to different people and have that exchange. But now it's expanded so massively that you can like hardly stand it. Like it's amazing. It's amazing to some degree. It's overwhelming to some degree because it's
Oh,
so
it's
much
true.
potential. It's to some degree, I perceive it as so much potential that we are not prepared for that. Like our body, our
Absolutely.
biology, evolutionarily speaking, we are not made for that incredible amount. I mean, we are not ready for that. Our biology hasn't been encountering this massive amount of information so far. So it's a tough nut to crack, let's say.
It is, absolutely. And it's funny because if you look at the last 2 decades, how much technology has expanded,
Yeah,
we're doing things today that we wouldn't have even been able to comprehend doing 40, 50 years ago. Communicating across the world like this just would have been a completely foreign concept. And now you can connect with anybody on the planet through technology. It's really cool.
yeah, it's super cool, but it also bears some risks, right? That's
Oh,
that's what
always.
people that's what people also talk about, and there's this new thing that everyone is hyped about. I've seen, especially athletes have been very active in posting this sort of content. This AI imagery. Have you seen that on social media? This
I have seen that. Yeah, I have seen that.
yeah, it's a weird thing. And then suddenly recently I've been hearing comments about Chat GPT. So this is this new AI platform that can generate creative work, in a matter of seconds, because it contains information with respect to almost every single topic. So you can just type in what you want it to generate for you, and it can sort through the database and just you know put out some information that is in accordance with what you want to get out of the system. And I don't know if this is something um, that I'm particularly excited about, because I see it. You might make similar arguments for all kinds of technologies, that there is a lot of potential, but what if there are some unintended consequences that we haven't considered yet? And that's always the question.
Yeah, these are all great points on here, honestly. And I believe with anything that advances, and it can be up to the user in terms of that. I kind of look at this type of thing almost equivalent of like electricity. Electricity can power the grid. It can be life sustaining, but it can also create destruction and death and chaos.
Yeah.
And depending on whose hands it falls into.
Right.
With this artificial intelligence concept, I mean, the concept itself has been around for years, but now it's just recently been out onto the surface. And I don't know how much has gone. I mean, we've seen all the movies about what happens if artificial intelligence gets the better of us and capitalizes on that. It's almost sci-fi, but
we've been grappling with that idea for some time now, because there are a bunch of movies, that explore this idea of what could happen if this thing would get out of hand.
Yes.
And I mean, it's important that we consider that, because, like, really, what could happen if it gets out of hand? It's an important question.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people are thinking that, but the people pioneering these ideas also have dollar signs in mind in terms of the growth that they can get out of this too. So sometimes, those dollar signs can corrupt, an otherwise honorable concept.
Yeah. No, it's difficult. And I just recently had a conversation with a few friends, and when I hear these sorts of things, I don't really know what to think about it. And my immediate reaction, like my visceral reaction, is like, when I hear so much about AI and new technology, I'm like, I went back to my farm and hunting and this type of traditional living. I don't hear anything about AI. That's kind of my first reaction when I hear about that. I'm like, no. That's too much. Let's just back off a bit and go back to where we came from, because there's not much we can do wrong with going back to where we came from. That's one argument. But the other argument is, like, we're kind of better off. So I want to run this by you and tell me what you think. I don't really know what to do about it, because there's so much talk about living like our ancestors and this and that. And there are many things that are true about that, especially with respect to physical exercise and the direct contact with nature. I think this is really missing nowadays. But and like the nutritional aspect, that's an important one. And well, there are many aspects, but like sunlight as well. But then also there have been so many advances that have made our life so much better and pleasant, so much better and more pleasant. And it's hard for me to reconcile these things, because, and maybe it is easy. So tell me what you think about that, because it's a difficult thing if we think about it, right? Because on the one hand, we thinking about the idea of kind of going back to what we've been doing forever, but at the same time, these advances have been very beneficial for us in terms of making our lives more comfortable and allowing for people to, like, not starve, for instance, to just give us one example. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think with anything comes in life, there always is a yin and yang aspect to that. There's pros and cons of everything. And I think the important thing for us to do is to absorb what's useful and discard what's not. In terms of that, unfortunately, the aspects of it that are not useful are typically integrated with it as a whole and will always be corruptible by people. We are human beings, and we're corruptible beings, and we're always going to be influenced by greed, by money, by capitalizing off of the expense of other people. And I think that's just going to come with the territory on that. I think it's up to us as individuals to set the expectations and set the example. And first thing I think we need to do is we need to accept that this is the direction that things are moving in. It just simply is. When there are people in the world who have an idea and they have the money to back it, that idea will manifest, regardless of what our personal opinion might be. So I think accepting the direction things are going. I mean, we have self-driving cars. Yeah. I mean, with the age of artificial intelligence, if you look at the past 2 decades with smart technology, I mean, we can look at the phone that I am speaking to right now. 20 years ago, this was not even a concept that could have been fathomed by anybody. When the iPhone came out, that was groundbreaking technology. And now look today, looking back at the iPhone, the original iPhone is obsolete in terms of its capabilities. And now we have the ability to have this thousands of dollars of a device in the palm of our hands to where we can access everything imaginable on this planet. And we can tap into space satellites. I mean, really, it's surreal to think about this. So I think to answer your question, I think for us personally, it's important to take advantage of what we can utilize from this in a beneficial aspect, but discard what's not. Now, we have this metaverse that's overtaken, social media, to where you create this virtual reality that's sort of a parallel reality to our physical material world, our
Oh
world
yeah.
of the senses that you and I experience. And now we have this artificial, intelligence that sort of goes hand in hand with that as just another pillar to this virtual world. I think it started out as an idea to make money, but we tend to, as a species, to not look too far ahead in terms of the consequences and the repercussions of these
Yeah.
decisions and where they're going to lead. And history repeats itself time and time again on that.
Oh
I think
yeah.
maybe 50, 100 years down the road, we'll have a very surreal idea of what this is going to lead to. And all we can do is lead by example and set the expectations for ourselves, in my opinion.
No, that's a really smart idea. I think the only thing you can do to set something right is basically lead by example. But the thing is, it's not an efficient method, right? In that it takes a lot of time. If everyone would like immediately start leading by example, that's a different question. But for you,
Yes.
as an individual, to start leading by example, I mean, it's not as efficient as monetizing on certain ideas that spread like mad, right? Because certain ideas, they do spread like mad, especially if they involve, let's say, the consumption of a substance or the consumption of a medium, right? Like we have the smartphone is a good example, or the iPhone is a good example. Like people are nuts about it. Like everyone spends half of their day looking at watching, whatever, TikTok. And the danger, I think, also that you mentioned with artificial intelligence is that we as a species can't really look ahead at what potential unintended consequences might be, and that's why we just oftentimes we just follow our hedonistic impulses.
Yes.
And then the question is, how do we start? Well, if the question is how do we start communicating that with people, then your response probably would be start leading by example. So let's maybe dig deeper here. How did did you have a change in your thinking over time? Where did it start for you personally?
Yeah, sort of in what sense here, so that way I can narrow down a specific topic here and focus on that. Sort of in what any period of life that you're referring to about my own life, or
Yeah. Did you have a period in your life where you had a drastic switch in your thinking, or have you always been this guy who has been super disciplined and into exercise and into health and performance and motivating others? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have not always been this person here. In fact, I routinely love to share this story to let other people know the journey that I've gone to.
Oh yeah,
Many people who
let's
see
do
me in
this.
my day-to-day life, they see the end outcome of who I am today. They see this person who I am sitting here, February 2nd, 2023, and make all the assumptions in the world that they might want to make off of my persona, who I am, how I present myself. But the truth of the matter is, I'm molded by the experiences of my past and in my childhood and my teenage years through adolescence and so forth that have allowed me to become who I am today. And in fact, no, I was born to parents who conceived me at ages 13 and 15 years old. So I didn't grow up in a very structured environment at all. I grew up with alcoholic grandparents. I'd seen a lot of domestic abuse in the household, a lot of tragic incidents as a result from drunk driving, and so on and so forth. So when I was younger, from my adolescent years up to my early teens, I suffered from serious states of depression, anxiety, stress, chronic anger. I got into some trouble with the law, some legal matters, got into some fights. I was sentenced to anger management classes. I was later on diagnosed with, depression, anxiety. I had chronic stress, impulsive anger issues, and this was a cycle that completed itself for years and years and years. I started to pack on a lot of weight in my teens. I became very overweight, unhealthy. I had high
Oh
blood
wow,
pressure. I was pre-diabetic. I
in your
rushed into a
teens.
family
That
in
was in
my
your teens.
teens. In my teens, yeah. So I remember
Ah,
I'd gone to the doctor when I was in my late teens, early 20s, just for a referral, just for a typical referral, and he had taken my blood pressure as a part of the statistics. My blood pressure was something crazy, like 185 over
what?
110, something ridiculous like that. I was overweight. I wasn't obese. I was borderline obese.
Yeah.
And, he's like, I'm really concerned. He wanted to take some blood work. Sure enough, a week later, my blood work comes back. I was pre-diabetic. So here I am. I'm in my late teens, early 20s. I'm chronically depressed. I'm socially anxious. I've got high blood pressure. I'm pre-diabetic. I didn't know who I was. It was a shell of the potential that I could be. I was not an active person. I was far from fit. I'd rushed into a family. I'd got married at a young age, had a child at a young age, made some terrible decisions in my life outside of that aspect of my life. And I remember being in my early 20s, and I was at the lowest point ever, to where I'm talking suicidal thoughts. I was a burden to the world. I would blame myself for my mother's death, and just a whole number of things.
How old were you then? Was it mid-20s?
I was early 20s then,
Early
when my mom
20s.
passed away, and that's when I had gone through a divorce. So I was going through a divorce right around the same time that my mom had passed away. And I was at a point where I was really starting to question my purpose on this planet, and all this chaos that's happening around me. This had to have been a result of my own existence, is what I would tell myself. So, of course, you tell yourself the story. Oh, you're better off dead. You'd been better off if you weren't born.
Oh, yeah.
And I was at the lowest state I could ever be in. And I never even imagined what life could be like outside of this dark hole.
Like, you had almost literally everything bad that could happen to someone. Like, you had you were yourself suffering from like obesity and prediabetes and high blood pressure, which is like severe enough, and then you didn't grow up in a particularly positive social environment, and you didn't have a nice household with nice, lovely parents. In fact, it was quite the opposite. And then I imagine you didn't have good figures, like mother and father figures, that taught you how to like take personal responsibility for your life and things you do. And then you got into legal trouble and whatnot, and developed, and like, no wonder. And it's not that separate from that you develop depression. Like, obviously you develop depression, anxiety. I mean, who would not? Given these circumstances, it's not a surprise that you started to suffer from mental conditions. But question that comes to mind, when you tell me these things, how does that let you feel? Because I want to know, do you think that you were probably able to process these sorts of events that happened in the early stages of your life? What kind of emotions does telling this story to me elicit?
Liberation, because I can look back over 20 years ago, and I can look at that person who I was before, and it's a sobering reality, which is why I save a lot of my photos that I had of me when I was in my early 20s, because it reminds me of how far I've come. Without those photos and without those memories, that would just be a distant memory of the past, and I would often just take for granted who I am today. And it reminds me, like, wow, not only do I see myself in this physical capacity, but I recall the state of mind that I was in at this particular time, and I can compare it to who I am now. And it's liberating. It's a liberating feeling to know that a person can be in the deepest layers of the sewers and still be able to climb out there and let go of the mental burdens that hold you back in life and prevent you from actually becoming the person that you can create for yourself. So I say, if I were to associate any word with that, it would be liberating.
So you regularly confront yourself with that past? Is that right?
Not regularly, I would say. Every now and then I'll share my story with other people to see if I see people who go through, who might have been, maybe in their early 20s, or maybe even not. Maybe they're older. They're in many stages of life. I see that, and I like to continuously share that for other people, because I regularly get new followers on my page, and I like to remind people, hey, I have not always been this person I am today, because it's easy for me as a person, if I had not gone through that adversity in life, to sit here and reflect on my life without having experienced myself. So I like to let that be a reminder for other people. Hey, I've been here. I've undergone it. It might not be exactly what you're going through, but it's my own story, and I can relate to the degree of the mental burdens that it places on your life. So I like to do that. But there was a time where I did have to confront myself, and I had to be objectively honest with myself. And I looked in the mirror and be honest with who I was. That was the first step to being able to overcome it. And from there on, it was just creating those cycles to where I would peel back the layers bit by bit to find out who I really was at the deepest level. Yeah,
so this confrontation thing is like a key aspect of, well, any form of psychotherapy for that matter. I don't know. You can tell me about it. Did you do any form of like therapy, psychotherapy? Any of that?
Absolutely. So I had probably seen over half a dozen counselors, therapists, psychologists
Mm-hmm.
from the time that I was 14 years old up until
Ooh.
I was 20 years old. And none of them truly therapeutically helped me. It felt good in the moment to be able to speak to somebody and have somebody be on the other end of the room who's listening to my story, but I never truly felt that hope. I never truly felt
Mm-hmm.
that this was something that I could do to change. Every time I left the session, I almost felt disempowered because
Mm.
I was convinced that there was something inherently wrong with me. This is just the way my brain is operating. This is the
Yeah.
program that it's running. There's nothing I can do about this, is
Yeah.
what it would routinely be said. There's nothing I can do about this. I can learn skills to cope and to manage, but this is probably going to be something I'll have to deal with for life,
Yeah.
is really what I was told, or at least how I interpreted the words of these counselors and therapists. So while it felt good in the moment, having that initial dopamine rush that, hey, somebody's over here listening to me, I never felt that I was taught the tools to discover who I was inside and to be able to pull back those layers. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'd probably seen 7 or 8 counselors and psychologists throughout the years to no long-term lasting effect.
It's interesting that you mentioned that example with what message you received from these consultations, because it reminded me of something that I've heard Jordan Peterson say with respect to one of his clients. He likes telling that story because the story goes something like, this client came to his office and asked and told him, "Look, I hope something's wrong with me. It's not. I hope that it's not the world, because if it is the world, that means I have to deal with that forever, and there's nothing I can do to fix it, because it's the world that conspired against me, so to speak. But I really, really hope that it's me that's stupid and arrogant and ignorant and yet doesn't possess the tools to properly deal with that problem. Because if that's the case, then I'd like just to know what I can do to take that into my hands and to do something about it." And this kind of reminded me of what you just said. And I think this is also missing in education and when parents raise their children. That's a core message that's really missing, because the idea is not that the world is all nice and good. It's quite the opposite. But you're the one that has the power to develop the tools to properly deal with that suffering, because it's going to be inevitable one way or another.
Absolutely. And in fact, if so many people believe that change cannot happen until the outside world is in alignment with how they wish to feel or their own expectations of what the world should be. The world doesn't care about our expectations. We are one of 7+ billion people on this planet. To think that the world cares about our expectations is to have this sense of entitlement that is going to set ourselves up for failure. So we need to first accept the fact that the world does not care about our expectations of the world. The world is going to be what the world is going to be. What we can do is we can change our perspective of the world. We can change our perspective of a situation that happens to us or around us. It's not the event, the situation, or the thing that creates the outcome. It's our perception of the situation. And case in point, you can get somebody who has a crippling fear of, say snakes. That snake, whenever they see a snake, creates a sense of panic. They go into this panic attack. They have convulsions. They might pass out. To them, that snake is causing the panic attack. So therefore, as an outsider who's not familiar with a phobia, will say, wow, I need to stay away from snakes because snakes cause panic attacks. They cause you to pass out. They cause these health ailments. But you can get another person who grew up with snakes. They love snakes. They handle snakes. They're a snake handler. They're a snake tamer. They'll pick up the world's most venomous snake and they'll interact with it. And they're completely fine. That person is not affected by the snake. That person has an entirely different perception of the snake. So it's not the snake. It's our built-in program and how we perceive that information, and then how our body physiologically responds to it. The same concept can be applied to anything in life. You can get two entirely different people who go through the entire same situations in life, and they come out completely different based off of their perceptions. Now, environment influences our perceptions, but how we respond throughout our life will also impact that path of least resistance in our head. So it truly does, if we're able to step back from that visceral response from external stimuli and we're able to be mindful in the moment, we can gain perspective and we can channel that sense of inner awareness and mindfulness to be able to change that perception of what's happening to us. And therefore we can move on with a better head.
Yeah, that's a very stoic idea, right? That you kind of detach yourself from your primary visceral response to whatever event is happening. And I mean, to give the devil its due, the primary visceral response, I think it does have some biological groundings. Because like some things, they just are, for all kinds of reasons, some of them are certainly biological, evolutionary, are, or they signal something like a threat or danger, let's say. And certain predatory animals are part of that category. That's why so many people are actually, in fact, afraid of snakes or like spiders or wild cats, like tigers, lions, etc. So they do elicit that fear response, that first, that primary response, and then death, illness, cold, all feels uncomfortable. So there's not really much you can do with that. Like you can learn, I believe, to control your secondary response to that. So this reaction, like imagine you get, I believe you're one of these guys who practices cold plunge and cold exposure.
Yes.
Like how could it be else? Obviously. And it's a very interesting experience because I do that. I have been doing that for a very long time now. And it's not that I like being in the cold. Like it doesn't feel, I can't relax. I can truly relax like in a warm environment, for example, or in my bed. It's not the same kind of relax, but it's something different. It's this feeling, it's actually way better than that because you feel like you're in control of that suffering because it feels really uncomfortable. Like you're sitting in that cold or taking that cold shower. It's not that it's great, but you can control that. You're more than the suffering. You're more powerful than that, and you can detach yourself from it and get into a state that allows you to take control of it. And so I think that's a more nuanced message because it doesn't presume that the first line response isn't justified, because I think it is. I think there's some biological explanations to why people react in certain circumstances, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think there are some, and I do think there are some that are irrational.
Yeah,
Some that are embedded into us throughout experiences in life. But I do feel,
100%.
for example, if you, for example, were to stand on a 2,000-foot cliff and look over the ledge, your heart's probably going to start racing a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you are aware of the consequences of stepping over that cliff. You are aware it's a built-in survival mechanism.
Yes.
Now, the degree of reaction is going to vary from person to person. Some people be like, whoa, crap, that's pretty far. And some people might just faint, pass out.
Yeah.
And it depends. So I think exposure, if you want to grow, exposure to things that make you uncomfortable, to allow yourself to grow, to breathe, be mindful in the moment. Just like cold exposure, you're in the cold, you are forced to be mindful because when your body's shivering, you are forced to be present in that moment. Breathe, focus on the breath. It causes you to, you have to, versus if you're lying in the comfort of your own bed where you can relax, it's an entirely different stimuli outside of your body. So I do believe that there is an element, if a person wants to experience personal growth, to put themselves in situations that are uncomfortable, not necessarily dangerous per se, but uncomfortable. So you can acclimate to that discomfort that life will inevitably throw at you, because it will.
That's the point I was trying to make, and I believe it's a really powerful thing. This whole making yourself voluntarily uncomfortable, because that's the whole, like, this is the entire basis of behavioral therapy. Basically, you confront yourself with what you're afraid of. That's pretty much it, and incrementally. So not like, you know, if someone has agoraphobia, you don't just shove that person into an elevator, close the door, and let him sit there. So it is
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Doing that would be the equivalent of taking a person who is not physically fit, who's never lifted weights in their life, and telling them to go ahead and go bench press 315 pounds.
Yes.
You know, you incrementally, progressively overload yourself. You progressively overload your mind in a way to where you can handle it, and you can incrementally go up each step.
And then what happens, I believe, is not that the suffering becomes less intense, because, like, you know, you're an athlete, like, you train like a beast, and it's brutal. Like, it's brutal. It doesn't become easy as you progress, but you become better. You become more courageous, first of all, to confront it, and you become better at controlling this pain and suffering.
Yes, and your threshold goes up. So what would normally, I'm actually going to switch my headphones out here real quick so I can charge my phone. Just 1 second.
Oh, yeah, sure, no problem.
Can you hear me okay?
I hear some
Let's see
noise.
here.
Oh
You hear
yeah,
some
okay,
noise?
now it's good.
Cool. Sounds good, man. I just had to plug in my phone over here. The battery was just zapping like crazy. I've never seen it
Ooh,
go down that.
yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. So this threshold idea, that's, by the way, it's so cool that you bring it up. This threshold goes up because that's exactly what I say when people like ask me why I rarely experience stress, because I'm like, I don't know. It feels like due to my exercise routine and my history of working out for the past couple years, I've been able to move that threshold up so that things that might have been stressful to me 5 years ago aren't perceived as stressful anymore.
Exactly, absolutely. And the same principles can be applied to the mental aspect of life as well as the physical aspect of life. Same with physical training. A person's rate of perceived effort might be, say, an 8, but then you continuously train, you progressively overload for a period of 3 months. And now the same workload that they're doing
Yeah,
will probably bring the rate of perceived effort down to like maybe a 6 or a 5. So
yeah.
therefore, their C is increasing. Same way with mental exposure to stressors in this world, as long as we are conscientious and mindful on how to perceive them.
Tell me, when did you start your exercise journey? Like we've been talking about your past and the horrific things that you went through in your early 20s, let's say. So tell us maybe first of all, if you're comfortable doing that. What's your age now? So
Yeah, I'm 36 years old. I just
okay,
turned 36 back in November.
okay, and now when does the change began? Because you've been in a pretty miserable state.
The change began. So there were several periods of transformation that are notable here. So the initial change was actually more of a spiritual guidance that led me to that inner growth and that inner change, to where I actually spent the first maybe 12 to 18 months of this point onward mentally healing myself, and then dropping the weight down from 250 pounds to probably 160 pounds. So I lost a significant amount of weight with no resistance training. It was just merely dietary changes in my life. I had taken a close look at my nutrition, taken a close look at my diet. I eliminated everything that was no longer serving me. I stopped eating fast food. I stopped drinking pot. I cut out all the sugary drinks. Any significant change that I could make to make a difference, I made that. And at the rate of which I lost weight reminded me of how much just unhealthy products that I was consuming in my life that really didn't serve me. Because if I was able to drop that much weight, it shows you that that was the majority of my calories.
Oh yeah.
That was the majority of my going in there. Yeah. My blood pressure started stabilizing. It started leveling out, so on and so forth. And I spent maybe 12 to 18 months dropping that weight, focusing on my inner journey. And then about a year after that, I actually started physically training. So I started physically training when I was in my late 20s. I would say mid to late 20s, probably. It's been about 10 years now. So 26, 27 years old is when I actually started physically training my body. I didn't have a strong familiarity with what I was doing, but I would just go to the gym and I would figure out what I would do when I get to the gym. I'd maybe lift a few dumbbells, do a few bench presses, do some
Okay.
squats, swing some kettlebells, do
So
some
you
sprints.
just you
I
just
was
started
never.
with regular weight resistance training.
Exactly. And there was no method behind it. There was no progressive overload. In fact, the concept of progressive overload was completely foreign to me. I had no idea what I was doing. But it was about that following year is when I started immersing myself into strength and conditioning, into training. I started training in mixed martial arts. I started working with some amazing strength and conditioning coaches in mixed
Oh yeah.
martial arts that taught me the energy systems. I started studying under the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and I just immersed myself heavy into this mode of life, and it truly did help complete that transformational process.
So what do you believe has been most influential in your what you said transformation process? Was it the weight loss? Because I mean merely from merely biological perspective, there's like an insane association between depression and like mental distress and anxiety and being overweight or obese. Like that's a crazy association. But then also that's not enough, because it's not just that being overweight causes depression. It might be reverse causality, by the way. And also you had so many you had so
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And then also you had so many horrible things that happened in your life before that that it's hard for me to see how weight loss alone could have relieved your anxiety and your depressive state. So what do you think has been most powerful in doing that? Was it the exercise? Was it anything else you did?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I will say with 100% certainty that if I weren't to fix my head initially, the weight loss wouldn't have happened. The physical transformation wouldn't have happened unless I fixed what was going on up here in my heart. It was my spiritual journey that led me to this. And this started when I was
Let's
going
talk
through a
about that.
divorce.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Absolutely. I was never much of a spiritual person. I was always growing up more of like an agnostic. I was open-minded, but it was never anything that I delved into. And just something that was kind of always on the back burner of life. So one particular time I was going through a divorce, I was picking up my then stepdaughter it was like a ballet recital at this community center.
Yeah.
And I was at this point to where I was pretty low. And at this community center, I'll lay it out. There's probably 10 doors on the right, 10 doors on the left. Each door is their own room where they have, say, like martial arts, dance, ballet, whatever it might be. So I'm waiting in line with all the other parents to pick her up, and I'm at the very far end of the hallway, like the close end to the exit. So on the very far end was this Buddhist. It wasn't a Buddhist temple, but it was more of like a Buddhist learning center where you could go and you could do seminars. You could learn about the teachings of Buddhism. Mm-hmm. I've been there for quite some time. So I'm waiting in line, and outside of this door of this Buddhist center comes a monk, and he walks down the hallway. He passes probably, I don't know, say 30 parents waiting to pick their kids up. He stops and he turns around, he looks at me, just me, and he hands me a pamphlet. He doesn't say a word. He hands me a pamphlet, and he continues to walk. And I looked at him, I'm like, what? Look at the pamphlet. It was just an introductory to the teachings. He passed every single person, and he handed this to me, and he kept on walking.
Interesting.
And this is interesting. And I held on to that. I didn't let it go. I held on to that. And I remember I put it down in my house. And it kept like reappearing. So no matter where I put it, like if it was on the coffee table or if it was on, the dining room table, it wouldn't matter. I'd always see it. It would always to me in the mornings when I'm getting ready. I'd look over and it was there. I'm like, man, I have to go check this out. I have to. And I did. It was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. I went there, I checked it out, and I immersed myself into this. And that experience that I had right there taught me so much more about life, about our existence as just this spiritual being. And it opened up the doors to growth, to learning, and everything else I could do. A lot of the practices that I taught were very, very parallel to Stoic practices of ancient philosophy. Very similar teachings in that sense. From there, I started going into Taoism, of the Chinese folk religions, and I started learning about hypnotherapy. I was introduced to a very prominent hypnotherapist practitioner in Washington State at that particular time, and that led me to reaching out to him. And I remember there was this time that probably spanned over about 6 months between the spiritual journey that led me to the hypnotherapy, met with the hypnotherapist, and I explained to him, I have gone to counseling and therapy for a decade, and here's where I'm at now. Are you able to help me? He taught me subconscious programming. He explained to me about how our life experiences accumulate this path of least resistance in our subconscious mind. And until we address the subconscious root, we're always going to continue to revert back to our old ways. And we need to reappraise that. And all of these occurrences that span over, like I said, about 6 months, provided this life-changing epiphany for me to be able to finally feel like I was empowered with my own tools to incorporate that practice into my daily life. And from there, it was unraveling one layer after another, until I finally started remembering who I was at the core, at the deepest level, after I'd put on so many of these masks covering up this identity. And it was liberating. And from there is when the journey of transformation, physical transformation, began to happen. But I can say with certainty, if it weren't for that spiritual and subconscious transformation, the physical would have never taken place.
Oh yeah. No, that's fascinating. But then, okay, let's walk through that. So you mentioned you were handed in this, was it like a piece of paper, pamphlet?
It was like a pamphlet, yeah, like a pamphlet that talked about classes.
Okay, and so why did it struck you that he gave you that? Was it the way he looked at you? Was it just the fact that no one else were given this piece of information, because I mean the fact that were that you saw it, no matter where you went in your, in your house, in your room, you will always see it. It's an
Yeah.
indication that it's been on your mind all the time, because that's it's typical. It's what we all experience from time to time. Like if someone, I had it recently. Like we were talking about with someone, we're talking about, I don't know, what was it, police cars. Someone told me a funny story about that, and then everywhere next day I was seeing police cars because it was just on my mind that day. So what we
You're
think
focused on.
about, that's what we see. Or people that are
Yes.
they're very negative in their attitude. They perceive, like, that's what they see. They look at the world and they see everything through a negative lens. Or someone who is very, very orderly. They go into the room and they look for places that could be rendered more orderly. So that's what they see. That's literally, like, that's my mom, for example. She just walks into my room and that's what she sees. Like, that could be better,
Absolutely.
that could be better, that could be better. That's just the way she perceives the world. So that's an indication for me that that's been on your mind. So why do you think that was the case?
Well, the prominent thing that stood out to me was the fact that he passed every single other parent. And when I was detailing the layout of the hallway, the fact that I was on the far end, so every other parent were picking up their kids in every other class that was getting out around that time, he passed every single person who had been frequenting this facility for just as long as I had. Passed every single one of them, stopped and looked at me, made eye contact with me, handed me this paper, didn't say anything about it. And then
Yeah.
the fact that it repeatedly showed itself up over time really spoke to me, and I had to pay attention to that. I knew something called to me, and I to this day I can't say what it was, but something called to me that says I need to go in here. And as soon as I went in there, I was taught. I mean, the
And so what
Dharma
happened
teaching.
there? What happened there? You went in there. Was it like a seminar? Was it a group experience? How did it happen?
So I walk in there, and there's a whole host of people in there. I'm talking maybe 25, all different cultures, ethnic backgrounds, people from different walks of life. It was really, there's this blended pot of all these people from different parts of the world that I didn't even know existed in this particular place at this time. We're going there to learn, genuinely learn. There's been people in there who had been going there for years. There was new people like me. And I was just immersing myself with the teachings when he was reading from the Dhammapada, like the teaching, the sayings of the Buddha, talking about suffering. That was the topic of the day, was suffering, the cause of suffering. And
Yeah.
I had been somewhat familiar with Stoic practices up until that point, not super familiar, but I'm like, this sounds very similar to some of the teachings I've read of Marcus Aurelius,
Yeah.
the Roman emperor. And the parallels started getting me thinking about this. I'm like, where is the connections happening from? And then talking about the Noble Eightfold Path in life, the Four Noble Truths of life, of suffering. I'm like, wait a minute. That's what really got me to believe and convinced that it's not the situation necessarily, but it's our perception of the situation and our attachment to the situation with our own expectations. Not even the spiritual component of it, but the philosophical component of it. The spiritual aspect of it came later. I followed my spiritual journey as a result of this, but it wasn't necessarily a spiritual transformation in that moment, but more of a philosophical outlook
Yeah.
that allowed you to get from here and to look at things from over here. Really started learning more about suffering. And from there, coincidentally, is right when I got in touch with the hypnotherapist who actually incorporates many aspects of Buddhism in his practices. And I mean, the parallels were just so striking. I knew I had to continue moving forward with that.
So the event allowed you, kind of opened up your possibility to perceive new information, let's say, that could help you to transform your psyche, your inner being. Or how you described it was to kind of to uncover what has been covered up by all these traumatic events that happened over the course of your life. And I actually really like that analogy, because it presumes that there is something that we don't necessarily have conscious control over in terms of, like, rendering it something that we would like to render it into. It's more like there is a core that we have to kind of discover. So it's there, and it's a result of biology and tradition and evolution and social influence, and we kind of discovered that. But there are oftentimes many layers on top of that, depending on the things you experience over the course of your life. And so you went to that hypnotherapist, and Tell me how a session looks like, because I have no real idea of how hypnotherapy works.
Yeah, so the initial meeting was just a consultation. It was just a discussion with him. There was no actual hypnosis that took place in this particular spot, but this was honestly probably one of the most mind-opening sessions we had, because they were leading questions where he would ask me,
Oh yeah.
Aaron, what do you want in life? Say, I don't know. I just want to be happy. Who doesn't want to be happy? The
Yeah.
typical canned answer, I want to be happy. And then he said to me, he's like, well, what does that mean to you? And I remember I looked at him and I didn't know. I didn't know. I said, well, and I started trying to just come up with something off my tongue, right? I'm starting to try to come up. I'm like, well, he's like, I'm going to stop you right there. He's like, how can you ever live a life that you claim that you want to live if you cannot define it in front of you? And I'm like, wow, it's a really good question. I never thought of the most mundane question that you could imagine. I'd never really thought about that before. And then that led to another question. That led to another question. He's like, I want you to turn around. He's like, I want you to pay. This is what we're going back to about the topic of focusing on a particular thing and discovering that in your day-to-day life. He said, I want you to turn around and I want you to focus on everything in the room that's yellow. So I did. Turn around. I'm like, oh, there's a thing of bananas over there. There's a calendar on the wall that's yellow. I'm doing all this. I'm really hyper aware. I'm hyper aware of everything that was yellow. Now, I'm in a yellow room right now, coincidentally. So I do. I turn around. He's like, now I want you to close your eyes. He's like, now I want you to tell me everything you saw that was green.
I like that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. In fact, what I thought was green was not green. And now he says, open your eyes, turn around, and count everything you see that's green. There were more green things in the room than yellow things. Yet my subconscious mind did not detect that, or at least consciously I was not aware that it detected that. And I finally turned around and I'm like, there's no way I missed all this.
Yeah.
Like, literally the floor is green. I'm like, the refrigerator, all these things. And it blew my mind. He's like, what we continuously focus on in the privacy of our own head is what we're going to discover. And these were the type of questions that really allowed me to start seeing outside the box. And then what he really did was...
Because you have to experience that yourself. I mean, it's not enough if I tell you, look, you have to focus on these things to like become a happy person in life. That doesn't work. You have to have that experience of feeling how it feels like if you miss a crucial part of your perception. And it's possible. Like, people don't understand that it's a legit thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. The final one was he picked up a pen, because I said to him, every time I try to make a change in my life, I revert back to my old ways. Mm-hmm. And he said, wait, what did you just say to me? I said, every time I try to make a change in my life. He's like, did you say try? I said, yeah. He's like, I'm going to do something. He's like, I'm going to pick up this pen. Just say I'm going to pick up this coffee cup. I'm going to hold it out in front of you. I want you to try to take it from me. He's like, I'm not going to play a trick on you. I'm not going to pull it away. He's like, I want you to try to take it from me. So what do? I took it from him.
Yeah.
He's like, no, put it back. He's like, I didn't say take it from me. I said, I want you to try to take it from me. I said, so I'm sitting there going like this. He's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm trying to take it. He's like, you're not doing anything. He's like, you're not committing to taking it, are you? I said, no. I said, what does this mean? And he explained to me, he's like, if you have complete control over the outcome of a situation, there is no such thing as trying. If there are no outside variables that stop you from doing something, you either commit to it or you do not commit to it. And he went on to explain the differences between endeavoring to do something and giving an attempt, where there are outside factors. And he gave like a sports, let's say a football game, for example. Yeah. It's like you're out there, you're trying to win, but there are outside variables that come into play. That's different than if you have direct control over the outcome. Mm-hmm. For example, quitting smoking. How many people say, I'm going to try to quit? You're either committed to it from the beginning or you're not committed to it. There is no outside variables
I see.
that play a role. So he said, I had to use the simplest of mundane of tasks, from taking this cup out of my hand, to demonstrate the point of this. He's like, now we can look at it at a more grandeur level. You have to be able to be committed from the beginning, and you have to have the underlying why as to why you need to do this. It's up to me to reprogram all those old programs. And then he went into the analogy of the brain is the hardware, the mind is the software, comparing it to a PC. Every now and then, the software picks up a program. It picks up a virus. It prevents the hardware from running effectively, right? So now we need to develop our own internal antivirus software to rewire that program so we're running effectively. All these analyses were speaking directly to like my soul. Yeah, I was able to really like, boom, makes perfect sense. Then, so you asked about what a hypnotherapy session looks like. A hypnotherapy session, nothing like I had ever imagined before. So basically, hypnosis in terms of subconscious programming is entering the theta state, the theta brainwave. The theta brainwave is the brainwave that bridges the consciousness with the unconsciousness. It's what we enter in twice a day when we're waking up, when we're going to sleep. We go through theta. Theta is also the state of frequency that most children live in up until they're about 7 years old. Most children are in the waves. That's why people say children are like sponges. Their brains are like sponges because they're absorbing everything around them. And they're the most crucial times of a child to learn when they're up until they're about 7 years old. And then consciousness starts kicking in. They're in that state. Well, what hypnosis does is it induces the theta state by walking you through progressive relaxation. That's all it is. It's all progressive relaxation, and a good hypnotist learns your ability to be receptive. If you're a visual learner, if you're an audible learner, whatever it is you might be, they guide you through this path of relaxation. Sometimes have you imagine yourself closing your eyes, playing ambient music. Now you're walking down a flight of steps and you see this beautiful garden out in front of you. With every step you take down the staircase, you're becoming more and more relaxed, deeper relaxed. When you get to the bottom of the staircase, you are more relaxed than you've ever been in your life. And then you're going to be able to lay back in your chair and absorb everything in that I tell you. That's inducing hypnosis. And then from there, they walk you through your life. They walk you through your past. They walk you through your experiences, and you share your experiences consciously. You're consciously aware. You're just really relaxed. And then you're able to go back and you're almost able to reassess how you look at a situation. So, for example, back in your childhood, if you perceived a situation that may have been traumatic to yourself, you're able to go back to that situation from a third person, watch it play out on a screen, and you're able to watch it with a calm head, a level head, your heart rate's rhythmic. You're able to assess the situation from a detached perspective, understand it, but you're able to let go of the mental burdens that have held you back. And then you're able to start building new habits and new pathways in your subconscious mind and move forward. And it says every day forward is going to be a new day where you're able to let go more and more and more of these crippling burdens that once held you back in life. So that's an example of how a session would look. He walks you out of it. You're in a state of awareness, and you almost feel like you had a really long sleep. You feel rejuvenated. You feel recharged. Like your batteries were just plugged in.
What is necessary though for this to make this letting go process complete? Because I believe, and tell me maybe if I'm wrong, but I believe just revisiting without any further extraction of the necessary lesson or whatever other process might be happening, just revisiting the experience from the past, I think is not sufficient to just let it, not disappear, but let it stop making you feel miserable, let's say. So what has been your experience? So what else must have happened to make you fully understand the crux of the problem back then and fully let go, whatever that means? Because it's like it's a tricky thing, because you didn't literally let go. You still have that experience. You can still tell me about it. So what exactly does that mean?
So it's letting go of the negative emotional attachment that holds you back in life. So you're still very conscientious about the experience that happened to you. You're still very aware of the repercussions that it could lead to, but you're no longer emotionally burdened by the baggage that it held on your life. And the way to do that is through repetition. Now, everybody is different. So you could have a person who goes in there with one session and they feel like a new person. They're great. They're able to let it go. Or you could have years and years and years of this chronic habitual, I guess you could say, abuse, whatever it might be, and it might take several times. So it's like building a new pathway in the forest. You go through the forest, you're whacking the bushes, you're taking your machete, you're clearing a path. Well, when we take the path of least resistance in our life, that's what happens. Yeah. So we need to allow that path of least resistance to grow back by no longer taking that path. So that means we might have to revisit old memories a few times so we can start building this new path. So we're building a path, we're whacking the bush, we're creating this new neural pathway in our subconscious mind. So now when we're in a situation that might normally elicit this emotional response, we go a different direction. Now we can feel more empowered. We can feel liberated. It takes time, but it takes discipline in our daily life. It takes to be mindful in the moment. And this is where practices such as mindfulness, meditation, there's techniques like Buddhist techniques called ekagata that you can do to really become more mindful in the moment and build new pathways. But it's up to us to be able to do the work. A good teacher can teach us the skills and they can guide us, but we truly need to have to apply this in our day-to-day life. We need to be able to wake up in the morning, practice our visualizations, practice our meditations, practice our self-hypnosis every day until we feel that we're truly liberated. And even then, it's like making your bed, because there's not a day that goes by to where we're not exposed to some outside chaos. And if we allow ourselves, we will always be subject to succumbing to that chaos unless we're grounded in the moment. But okay, it's time to remake our bed. Just like every day we get up, we make the bed. Yeah. Same thing with the mental programming.
But you mentioned a very interesting point at the beginning of your story when you started telling me about the how a session of hypnotherapy might look like, where he asked you what a happy life for you could look like, and you didn't have a clear idea how to respond to that sort of question, because and then you said something like you understood that a clear articulated why must be developed so that you can find the meaning that kind of sustains you through that suffering, let's say. Because that's been, as far as I understood, that's been your the most fundamental of your problems in your teens or early 20s. Because you've been at the point where everything was so horrible that you have become really nihilistic and suicidal, according to what you told me.
Yes.
Right. So the meaning was kind of absent. And the only meaning that can sustain you through that period in life is a why, is a very deep and powerful why. And so ideally, every action from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed is predicated on that why. So what has helped you to get to that bottom, you know?
Creating an alignment table that really helped me align my day-to-day actions with where I wanted to be. So that was my homework at the end of that day, was to create what this life is. What does it mean? And for the longest time, I was stuck in these limiting beliefs, because as soon as I would get an idea, my brain would start telling me, well, you can't do this because you don't have this. Or you can't do this because you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, you don't have the connections. All these limiting restrictions that were created through my own limiting beliefs. And I'd come back to him and say, hey, and it's like, man, I would like to do this, but he'd let me finish. And then he's like, what you're saying is you're giving off all these indications that are reflective of your own limiting beliefs that you have cast up through your experiences in life. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go back home. I want you to create this as if you had the power at the whims of your step of a finger. You could snap your hands and you could make anything happen in life. There's no restrictions. You have all the resources at your disposal. You've got all the money in the world. What life do you want to have?
Yeah.
Like, wow. That took time, because I was never conscious about my limiting beliefs as I was then. So many times, man, I would try to write something down and I'd be like, well, that's not realistic. And I would start telling, that's not realistic. I'm like, shut up. You got to shut up. I'm doing exactly what he was discouraging me from doing. So I finally had to do it. I'm like, well, what makes me feel good? What makes me feel good? I'm like, well, I know what makes me feel good right now is having this guy understand me. He's contributing to me. Man, I'd love to be able to do that to somebody. I'd love to be able to do that. Yeah. So I put down, love to be able to touch other people's lives. Yeah. Okay, there's a start. Under what capacity? I'm like, okay, now I need to work backwards from there. Work backwards from there. Work backwards from there. Like, now I need to define this. Okay. And you start feeling good. You start feeling really good about it. And then, he used all these analogies about how we're empowered by energy. And he would give stories about back when he was in school, he was an athlete, and, some of his coaches would have him run suicide runs to and from, the middle of the gym to the end of the gym and back. And he said the team would never know when the last suicide run would be, but the coach would watch when they start to fatigue. They start slowing down. Finally, the coach would say, one more run. And he said, every single person somehow summoned the energy to go 10 times faster on their last run. Why? Because they were energized by a clear end. And he's like, that's what you need to do. You need to be energized by your vision. It needs to be so clear and distinct that you can create it and bring it to life. And it did. I mean, all these analogies were just forming together within my mind, the way that I was able to perceive it. So I was able to create this plan, this alignment plan. I was able to create this chart to where, okay, your day-to-day actions need to be conducive to the life you say you want to live. Otherwise, our priorities probably are not what we planned them to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's so fantastic that you bring that up, because I believe there's nothing more valuable that you can do for yourself than, well, actually it's not good when I say it like that, because there are many valuable things, but it's a really valuable thing for someone to do is to create something like a plan. And I mean, there are so many reasons for why that's valuable. But first of all, you create you define something for you that's of utmost importance. And that automatically makes you less nihilistic, because nihilistic kind of means everything is of similar importance. And if nothing is at peak importance, then the importance is scattered in 1,000 pieces, in endless pieces, and everything becomes zero. So that's kind of nihilism. But then suddenly you kind of have meaning in your life because you're working towards an end, a desired end. That's number one. And number two, the only time, and that's a neurobiological fact, the only time you experience positive, like pleasure in what you do and positive emotion is when you have the impression that you move towards that goal,
Yes.
And so if you don't have it, then you have no positive emotion, and like no wonder that people are miserable all the time, because they have no noble goal. And why I say noble goal? Because if the goal is of low quality, like go into the supermarket and buying a pack of pizza to satisfy my immediate hedonistic pleasure, then that's not a really high goal that's really noble, because it doesn't take any effort to acquire it. You just literally go around the corner, take a piece of pizza and eat it, and there you have your pleasure. And then the positive emotion is gone, because the only time you experience it is on the way towards the goal. So you need a goal that's so high. You need a goal that's so high above what you can manage that it takes you a lot of effort and a lot of time to achieve it, and most likely you will never achieve it. Then it's actually the most noble of goals.
Absolutely. And the goal always should scare you a little bit. It should scare you because of how almost unfathomable the idea of hitting it is. And the problem is, so many people, like you said, they set goals too low and then they hit them. Well, I'm going to set another goal that's too low and I'm going to hit them. Are you really fulfilling your purpose in life? Are you? I wasn't.
Yeah. No, you're right. And then the next step is obviously, so number one, you need something like this goal, but then you need to break it down because obviously you can't jump from A to your goal that's so high. Like, it has to start with low-hanging fruit, but the low-hanging fruit is part of that tree. So you need to understand what's at the top, and so that's number one.
Yes.
And number two, it's not how do you say? It's not. It's still modifiable. It's malleable. So the goal is not cut in stone. It's something that can be modified slightly. So let me give you an example. So imagine me with my girlfriend. We kind of plan our future, where we're going to live and this and that, and want to have a family. So we kind of have an idea of how the future could look like. But what could change is the exact location, for example, where we're going to live. Because that's kind of up to debate. That's not really... That's something that still could change. But what will not change is the fact that we plan to be kind of together in a location and have a family. So, and same goes for any type of goal. So if you imagine, okay, you want to do something that touches people's hearts and help them to become stronger human beings. So that's kind of what you want to do. And there are many paths that could lead to that. And you can try different paths and see what works. But the goal still stays the same.
Absolutely, man. It's like equivalent to climbing a mountain, using that analogy. You're at the base of this mountain. You look up and you see that summit, and you see 12,000 feet between you and that summit. You've never scaled this mountain before, but you know where you want to be. You don't know the path. You don't know the path, and you have to be prepared for that path.
Yeah.
Because you might have this vision in your head about what this looks like. You might have researched other people's testimonials, other people's reviews.
Yeah.
You might have read on alltrails.com about oh, watch out for this here, oh, there's a crevice over here. You got an idea, but you need to be malleable. You need to be adaptable. You need to be able to acclimate to the environment so you can remember that focus. Because as soon as we get hung up on the wrong area, on the obstacle, we start to lose sight of our focus. When we lose sight of our focus, like, oh man, you know what? This is easier to go back down this mountain. I'm gonna try another mountain. That mountain's not fulfilling. That's not your mountain. You need to be able to acclimate to your environment and understand the need to be flexible and adaptable.
Right, that's the problem, because as soon as people perceive an obstacle, automatically it means like, oh my God, I can't do it, or it doesn't go according to plan, and so I might just as well pick another aim and and then start from zero. And you're right, I believe. And also, what also goes along with that is you need to acquire the necessary skills that will assist you in climbing that mountain. And like the mountain analogy is brilliant. Like that's maybe why we're attracted to mountains, because it's a thing that I've been thinking about so much. It's like, why the hell are we fascinated by mountains? Like, we travel for thousands of miles. Same with oceans. I haven't figured that one out, but mountains is kind of, I think I have. It's what we just mentioned. I think it's that why people are so obsessed about mountains, just mountainside. Go and just look at them. We're fascinated by looking at them. There's something that grips us when we just see that picture, right?
Powerful force of nature right there, honestly.
Yeah.
It really is. It's force of nature right there, being able to become one with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there was another comment I had on what you said, because it reminded me of what you mentioned a couple minutes ago with respect to the yellow color and the green color in the room. And this, if we tie that to defining a goal for yourself, it could be something like that. If you focus on the goal, what you will see is opportunities that can help you on your way towards achieving that goal. And this, you can use that for your advantage. So on the one hand, you might end up in a situation where you close yourself up and become blind to certain areas of life, and so that's a trap. On the other hand, you can fixate yourself on that goal so hard that literally you will go through life, and your consciousness will show you what there is that might help you in achieving that goal. So this is kind of the analogy with thinking about the yellow things and seeing the yellow things. So same with thinking about your goal all the time and seeing the tools that might be helpful in getting there.
Absolutely, man. And it reminds me of an old phrase. It was an old Japanese proverb. I can't recall exactly how it went, but it discussed the concept of action and vision working together. And vision without action is just daydreaming. And I believe it was action without vision is just being reckless. You need to have that vision, and you need to be able to take the steps, overcoming the adversity to be able to achieve that vision. Otherwise, our focus will just be so sporadically scattered throughout life, and we'll never really make much headway in any given direction.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. That's right. You mentioned in the beginning that you had this spiritual transformation. I believe it didn't end there, because you said you were agnostic at one point in time. How did that change? So I wanted to ask you, what do you mean by spirituality? And what I've been also thinking about is, what's the difference between spirituality or being spiritual and being religious? Because I always find it interesting when people say, "Oh no, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual." I'm like, come on, what do you mean? What do you mean by spiritual? Why not just say you're religious? Because you just want to dispense with this term, or what exactly what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge fan of the word religion, because the original word of the word religion means to tie and to bind under a specific set of doctrines. So you're expected to follow a specific belief system for a specific reward. I am in nowhere affiliated with that type of belief system. I am, if you were to classify me, I would be a pagan practitioner. The belief systems and the practices of our early ancestors, of every culture that has lived on this planet, from Scandinavia to Africa to the Native Americas to the Aborigines, every single culture shared this common root. The Aztecs, the Mayans, the Slavs, the Celts, you name it, all had this traditional indigenous practice that's still practiced today in many parts of the world. It's practiced today largely in India. What is now called Hinduism is practiced in Japan. What is now called Shinto. Many Native American practices all this. These are all what's considered pagan religions, pre-Abrahamic religions that were the way of the land. It's connecting to ancestral deities. It's connecting to celestial beings who we might refer to as gods or godly beings or celestial bodies. It's connecting to the spirits of nature. It's getting into the roots of who we are, who we truly are as this ethereal, incorporeal being. And there are, Buddhism really goes into detail about cosmology. They actually have an expanded cosmology on life and existence, the existence of the cosmos and who we are, not this physical vehicle that we're occupying in this realm of the senses, but who we are at the ethereal level. The concept of the cyclical world, how we're in the cycle of constant rebirth and death, over and over and over. And this is what I mean by spirituality. Spirituality, my pagan belief systems do not require a specific belief to achieve a specific result. By any means. It's simply how you live your life, how you honor, whether you want to devote your life to gods, whether you want to delve inward and do deep introspection, more of a Buddhist dharmic approach. There are really multiple paths to, in my belief, the same inevitable outcome. And that's truly, as you can see, I'm actually in my room. Behind me is my altar that I have set up. I'll show you real quick.
Yeah, sure. Oh, nice.
Right over there.
Wow.
I've got my altar. This is my altar room. Everything set up in there with my ceremonial practices. I wear every day symbols that mean a lot to me. This is the Mjolnir. It's you might recognize it as Thor's hammer. This is a Tiwaz, a rune, a Nordic rune associated with the god Tyr.
Tell me what these symbols mean to you. So why are you wearing them?
The Mjolnir is a symbol of Thor. It was Thor's hammer. Thor represents strength, represents purity. The Tiwaz has always been a rune that has always called out to me. It's associated with the god Tyr. The god Tyr is the Norse god associated with justice and bravery. And all the attestations in the Poetic Edda of the Norse teachings, Tyr is associated as being the most courageous of the gods due to his sacrifice over there. And to me, that stands for transformational purposes. You can't have courage in the absence of fear. You need to be able to have fear in order to demonstrate bravery and courage. And to me, that has always been such a noble attestation that I have always admired, and I've always felt drawn to him as well as his symbol. And this is a reminder in my day-to-day life that there's no fear, no adversity that our spirit cannot overcome. And it reminds me that when we feel that we're at our wits' end, that we cannot take any more, that the human spirit and our willpower is truly indomitable, and we can always fight on as long as we have another breath in us. So that's what these symbols represent.
Wow, yeah. No, I think that's really powerful. I think oftentimes, and that's why I have a problem with people who completely disregard any form of religious symbolism, let's say. Because I'm also not a fan of this dogmatic approach where you prescribe yourself a particular belief system and just believe in it for the sake of believing in it, and attach yourself to certain labels, and oftentimes that rigid belief system can become ideological and dogmatic and tyrannical.
Absolutely.
So that's the problem on the side of radical, like fundamentalism, let's say. But then you also have the opposite side, which is radical atheism, which completely disregards the spiritual and religious side. And I think it's too chaotic. And the reason I think it's too chaotic, it's like the opposite. The one is too rigid, too tyrannical, and the other one is too chaotic, because there can't be, I believe, a way of navigating the world without what we discussed in the beginning, without some form of why. And the problem with that is you can't derive it from the world. Like, the why doesn't array itself in front of you. Like, it has to come from somewhere. Because when you look at the world, there are just facts, millions of things and objects you could look at, potentially. But we don't do that. We pick things to look at, we prioritize our perception, and we prioritize our actions. And that's embedded in what we can consider the why. So in a value system, let's say, in a belief system. And so something must be at the top and something must be at the bottom. But what defines that is tricky. It's not the external world. It's something else. And religion oftentimes is a source for that. is a map that helps people that provides them this guidance how to navigate the world of value and judgment, let's say.
Absolutely, man. I think that's very well said. And the issues I have, and I always preface this when I speak on this topic, because some of my best friends in the world are of the Christian faith and of the Islamic faith. Amazing people out there. However, I do always like to distinguish and differentiate my reasons for sort of diverting from those paths, because they are dogmatic. They are more of a dogmatic approach. What you believe matters, and what you believe is sort of the embodiment of what makes you who you are. It's your belief system versus how you live your life. And, with the commandment approach and just the overall dogma of religion, I call them the Abrahamic faiths, the three branches that broke out after the practitioners of pre-Christian world. And I call them, really, though, in the grand scale of things, Islam, Christianity, they made up such a small part of our world. And to this day, I think it's about 53% practice between Islamic and Christianity and Judaism. However, there are still very strong active polytheists in this world, largely in Eastern Asia, in India, and many pockets across the other cultures, Native Americans, many Native South Americans as well, very, very devout into their spiritual practices. There are smaller pockets on them, but they're often not accounted for when surveys and statistics are done on the concept of religion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's something that's necessary to consider, at least to. I think it's you can't do it without something like that. You need some form of idea. Like the reason you wear these symbols, these the two things you're wearing, your necklaces. The reason you're doing that because there are a reminder of the values that what. Look, we mentioned in the beginning how to be an example for the world, and it's something like an embodied spirit that you kind of act out, and these symbols represent that. Like the hammer represents strength; it's a spirit, and Thor is a symbol for that. And all these gods are also spirits of a particular quality. And so what that reminds me of Egyptian mythology, because you have the Egyptian eye, Horus.
Yes.
And eye is vision. Vision is attention. And that's at the top of the pyramid, right? Because it's the highest good. It's what helps you to navigate the world. Because if you can pay attention, you can do everything else. And we need these sorts of symbols because they provide us answers to these problems and guidance in face of suffering, for that matter, because that's why people ask these questions, because they, as you said, that's what you came to therapy with. I want to be happy. I don't want, or if you could phrase it differently, you could say, I don't want to suffer that as much. I want to suffer less. That's the other way of putting it.
Absolutely, man. I think that's very well said. And yeah, the eye is a very common symbol across many belief systems.
Right.
There's the all-seeing eye demonstrated in Buddhism. There is the story of Odin sacrificing an eye in exchange for a dream. Well, that in theory, metaphorically stands for trading your worldly eye for your cosmic eye, being able to stop seeing the world from our human perspective and exchanging it for cosmic knowledge. There's so many different parallels and different teachings that essentially teach the same thing, spoken in different languages by different cultures, by different time periods is all.
Yeah. Is there like any are there books or anything you would recommend for people to read to get a handle on if someone would like to familiarize, or if I were to familiarize myself with what we've been discussing so far? Is there anything you read? Is there anything that has been particularly influential for your transformation?
So there's some, in terms of recent books. One of the biggest books I've read, say in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, is a book written by David Goggins. Phenomenal book. Jocko Willink also has 2 books, amazing books as well. He's another great author, great speaker, former Navy SEAL, in terms of more of the persevering through life's adversities approach on that. As far as anything else goes from the spiritual component, most, unfortunately, books out there are written to present information to a person who has already a base array of knowledge on there. I would say, honestly, any beginner's introductory book is good. So a lot of the Beginner's Guides to, or an Idiot's Guides to, is a very good introductory. Otherwise, they're speaking in terms of It's like teaching calculus to a group of fifth graders, essentially.
I see.
So you would look into this and be like, I don't really understand the concepts and principles behind this. But overall, honestly, I found a lot of them just through my own research, just through my
Yeah.
own, going to the library, pulling things out, seeing what finds interesting. Whatever calls to you in that particular moment might be something that, might be worth picking up. But yeah, as far as the other books goes, man, I think that Can't Hurt Me book really helped me shift my perspective, especially over the last few years.
Nice. No, these are the two you mentioned. These are powerful men. Goggins is fantastic, and Jocko is, yeah. I've heard him speak on all kinds of on a number of different occasions and podcasts primarily, and it's been always fascinating to listen to them. Also because they have had the experience that many people won't experience in their
Yes.
lives. And same goes for you. So that's why I want to once again thank you for coming on to my podcast, because I think what is so valuable about stories like yours is that, like, many people go through similar things, but like many people don't. But it's really valuable to hear these sorts of things, to understand what people go through in theory and how they got out of it again, because it's a really powerful act to liberate yourself from everything you experienced, you know. And like me personally, I did have these sorts of challenges, but that's even more why that's why I'm even more interested in speaking with you and listening to people talking about these sorts of things and reading books about, like, Viktor Frankl, and how he suffered in the Nazi camps, and all these kinds of stories, because they remind me, like, okay, people suffer like mad, and I'm better not taking for granted what I have, you know?
Absolutely. And that's what it comes down to, is not taking for granted what we have. And there's a practice that I like to do called negative visualization. And it's funny because when I say that to people, they think, oh, why would you engage in negative thinking? And I would say, it's not negative thinking. It's not negative thinking. Negative visualization is imagining, what if today were the last day when I could experience this, or this person, or this luxury, or maybe my left hand? What if today was the last day? And you sit there and you take a few minutes and you think about that, how your life would change if somebody was not in your life, or if you did not have one of the appendages that you have, or if you woke up and you didn't have your right leg. How would your life change? How would your life change if you didn't get paid, this month?
Yeah.
Things like this help you put things into perspective so you can become more grateful for it in the moment, because when we become so accustomed to dealing with the day-to-day things that we have, we take it for granted. Then guess what? If we lose it, sometimes so do we lose our happiness in those things. So not only does it help keep perspective, but it helps us to remain grateful and practice that gratitude for the things that we do have in life.
No, and that's really helpful. Like, the aspect of gratitude, I think that's what sustains many people through difficult situations. And for that matter, that's, when people ask me why am I always, like, laughing and doesn't seem to be stressed about life as much as they are, and I'm like, I don't know. And the best I come up with so far was, well, I've been thinking about everything I have, and I'm unbelievably blessed and grateful to have everything I have. And it's so unlikely. Like, just imagine how unlikely it is. From a historical perspective, it's like, first of all, it's unlikely that I'm even alive. Then second, it's unlikely that I was born in a time period where everything is going relatively well, where I don't have to starve, where I can live in a warm place without doing anything for that. So I'm just a beneficiary of what has been built by my ancestors for me, and I was just born into that, without having done it's such a privilege if you think about it for a second. And so that's that, and that's so powerful, because that gives you so much drive to go and do something with that,
Absolutely, man. That's very well said. And that's something I like to practice every day too. I have you and I both have the luxury of being born in countries that are highly developed. They're luxurious. We are chatting internationally right now, virtually.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when something goes wrong in my life, like I get a flat tire, or my phone died, or I get one second here, or I get a call coming in that interrupts the call. Things like that pop up, that might cause some frustration. And then I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, there are people in parts of this world that we live on, this planet, that do not even have the luxury of doing this. But guess what? They're happier. They're still practicing happiness and gratitude. because their threshold of what allows stress is not as high as ours, because the more you have, I feel complaining is almost a privilege, because the more you have, the more you have to complain about if it's not there. That's just the way I
Yeah.
look.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's why what we said in the beginning, it's important to from time to time to get uncomfortable. To see how it's like
Yes.
if you're not comfortable, if these things are absent, to feel how it's like. And that really gives you some gratitude. You can be sure about that. Like that's why we like to
Absolutely.
exercise, because then you're like, oh my god, just laying in your bed is such a privilege. Just to lay down and feel comfortable.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Aaron, it's been great talking with you. I think like I learned a lot. Thanks for sharing your story, because it's a very personal story. It's a very well, in some parts it's very tragic what happened to you, but it's even more so it's really uh, inspiring to hear what how you've been able to overcome these challenges.
Hey, thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity of having me on here so I can share this and chatting with you and getting to know more about your background, as well as putting another face to a name on there. I really appreciate that. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been like almost okay, it's been more than 90 minutes, so I think that's a good place to stop. So is there maybe tell us, so people where they can find more information about you and follow you, social media, anything else you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very active on my Instagram. I have two primary pages that I post on. My primary page is brainsandbrawn.86. It's my main page. I also recently created my professional page called Drengr Discipline. Drengr, that's a Norse word, Drengr, discipline, where I'm putting a lot of my mindset development coaching out on that program. Always happy to chat with new people and connect with new people across the world.
Great. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Hey, likewise. We'll talk soon.